Today I'm standing in front of one of America's most hallowed monuments. It's known as Grant's tomb. Grant's tomb. It's named for Ulysses S. Grant, the great American general who helped win the Civil War against the concept of slavery. And he was a person who stood for civil rights and a symbol of the beginning of American civil rights against institutional slavery. Today, it seems that there's going to be another assault on the civil rights of Americans, and this time an assault on the civil rights of women. In other words, a woman's right to control her own body and her own biological destiny. It's called the abortion controversy, and it's making headlines all over the world, including in India. It's a page one story, and people want to understand what all this is about. What is this whole abortion story all about? And to help you understand this, I am going to talk today to a veteran journalist. His name is Ken Tiven. We call him Tiv.
My optimistic side says maybe it isn't going to be as bad as we think. But I think what people need to understand is that the Republicans, as a minority political party, basically of the property class, want control of everything. And they're desperately worried that the changing demographics in America are going to erode their ability to win any elections. So they very cagily appealed to evangelical Christians who have a big interest in abortion for reasons of how they believe God creates humans. But they have been dragged into this as the vocal front of an assault on rights and responsibilities. No constitutional solution, because the founders didn't want anybody monkeying with the Constitution. So they wrote in a clause which said, you can pass all the amendments you want, but they can't go into force unless you can get 3/4 of the states to agree. And today we have 50 states, and 3/4 of those states is a big number, and especially when you've got a hassle of small states with populations of less than 7 or 8 million, and you got 40 million people in California and 20 million people in New York. So the whole system's out of whack in terms of representation in a democratic republic, in the sense of Plato's Republic approach to government, which is, so it's easy to be deadlocked.
So what's the number of states that actually allow, which have the most? What Roe v. Wade does is lays out certain basic formula under which it's not completely abortion on demand, right?
No.
It is certain criteria, right? Now, which are the states which are more liberal in their criteria for allowing abortions, and which are states that come close to even banning them? I don't want you to name all the states, but some of them. And what are the differences?
California, New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, most of New England has very rational laws about when a pregnancy can be terminated. States like Alabama, Mississippi, Idaho, some of the states that are really don't have a lot of people, but they have a lot of crazy people, have much more restrictive stuff. I mean, in 5 weeks, if you have to abort a pregnancy within 5 weeks, most women don't know they're pregnant in 5 weeks. Somewhere in 8, 9, or 10 weeks, they suddenly go, I don't feel so good in the morning.
Yeah.
Gee, honey, when was the last time we were together? Oh, I better go to the doc. So it's hopeless. The Equal Rights Amendment started in 1972 and still hasn't been approved by 3/4 of the states. They're like 2 states short. The Equal Rights Amendment would have created an aura in which you couldn't do some of what Judge.
So now what would happen, Tiv? Now we had this. The big story is the leak.
Yes, and look at what happened immediately after that. People like the governor of Texas said, well, we want to go after the rules that require us to educate undocumented children. We want to go after the rules about what books can be in schools. We want to go after all of these issues that we don't like.
Yes.
Because if that's the case, we can overturn all that stuff. The question of who leaked it is basically described this way: if the Supreme Court can't figure out who leaked it, then the Supreme Court leaked it. If they can find a culprit, then somebody else leaked it. But the feeling, general feeling in the media is, as I read the media, is that it was leaked to try and keep Chief Justice Roberts from convincing one of the three newbies to moderate and come up with a different decision that was not so arbitrary and apparently politically capricious.
What impact do you think this is going to have on the upcoming biennial elections, which are due, in November?
Yeah, the election really starts.
Well, who's going to get the advantage of this? Do you think the Republicans and the revivalists, if you want to call them, or the non-progressives, if you will, whatever name you want to call them by, will this go in their favor and create a greater pro-Trump or DeSantis kind of a movement, or will the Democrats, you think, get advantage of it? What's your reading on this?
Well, if the fundraising emails are any indication that the people who are opposed to this decision, they're finding me every day by the dozens. I don't have any money to give them this year, but that's another story. I think it's going to work to the advantage of the Democrats. I think that there are an enormous number of in-between, there's three political parties in the country that nobody talks about. There are Republicans, there are Democrats, and there are independents. And the independents are a chunk of low information, I don't give a damn voters, and voters who can't really decide whether they want to belong to a party, although you don't really belong to a party in this country, you just sign up as that party's voter for the purposes of primaries. I don't go to meetings with the Democrats or anybody, so I think that it's going to energize the people who don't want Roe versus Wade overturned. They're going to end up with some in-between kind of a decision, and I think that was Justice Roberts trying to protect the integrity of a court that looks very, very political these days, especially because, keep in mind, Clarence Thomas's wife is very certifiably involved in the January 6th insurrection.
Yeah.
Based on
all the
emails to Mark Meadows and back and forth.
Yeah.
I mean, all that's going to pour out in June hearings that'll just run into, the 4th of July holiday. And that's going to convince a lot of people who have still some brain cells to go, okay, that's enough. We got to do something. I mean,
so do you think overall this issue, Roe v. Wade, and what's going to happen, has this divided Americans more than the divisions that took place when Trump was president? Is this an issue that
I think it's coalescing everybody on the other side, because an awful lot of people on the other side just thought, we'll get through this and then we'll elect somebody else. I mean, Biden's economic performance and his performance in general, when people who know what they're talking about look at it, is pretty good. But, you can't blame him for gas prices when it was Trump who negotiated with the Saudis to reduce production.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of, and I have good friends who are Republicans and who are very right-wing. And they argue it and then they go, I know it doesn't sound very sane, but I got to believe it. He was a great president.
Now, Tim, we have a lot of young people who are in high school, who don't always read the New York Times, and who are following this abortion controversy and Roe v. Wade with great interest, but don't seem to get a hang on it. One of them has been listening to our conversation here. His name is Ishan Horwath. He's a New Yorker. He's a Brooklyn boy. He's 15 years old, and he's been listening to us. And I'm going to invite him to ask you a few just basic questions, as a young man would, to try and understand what this issue is all about. He's asked me a few times, and I haven't been able to explain it as well as you've been able to explain it to him. So, Ishan, do you have a question or so for Tiv or Mr. Tibbin?
Yeah, for sure. So why do you think abortion has become such a politicized issue?
Well, because the Republicans have very good advice on media and manipulation and propaganda. They saw there's a group of people who believe fiercely about abortion, who they could convince they would be the standard bearer for what their complaint was. They have no more the no more interest in evangelical Christianity than Donald Trump did. And the fact of the matter is, they got those votes because they didn't have any other place to go.
So, I mean, usually abortion has pretty much no effect on a lot of conservative men's lives. So why do you think they feel...
No, wait a minute. No, wait a minute. I think you will discover that from a statistical perspective, the number of people on who get abortions cover all political and social class and spectrums. You know, if you have more money, then you may have a better chance of getting an abortion from somebody who knows what they're doing as opposed to taking your chances. There's lots of Republican women whose daughters have had abortions in the last 20 years who are going to have to rethink what their husbands are saying about voting for Democrats. I think it works to the advantage of the people opposed to the 17th century. If you don't believe in the 17th century, I think we're going to be better off.
And I've noticed, like, especially a lot of young people take a lot of interest in protecting abortion rights because, I mean, think about it. If you're 16, 15, 17, and you get pregnant, you make a bad decision, you don't want to have to live with that baby growing inside of you for 9 months. I mean, it's risky to your health. It's for your mental health especially, so it's a huge issue among the youth.
Well, and you also have school systems that will not allow pregnant
That's true.
women in the school systems. So there's a lot of issues at heart here. Do you have schoolmates who are fervent Republicans and who think Donald Trump was the greatest president in the history of their lifetime?
Well, not so adamant, but yeah, there are some in our school, yes.
And where would you say they come from in terms of a representation? Any sense?
One of my friends, he's actually Dominican from Texas. So, I mean, he formed his belief, but it's mostly influenced by his father, his, religion. But I think religion is probably the largest factor that plays a huge role in their decisions.
Well, I mean, we know, for example, from research and polling that the huge Cuban-American vote for Trump goes to the sort of the South and Central American belief in the strong male leader.
Yeah.
We couldn't have Fidel because he didn't have the right stuff for us, but we like Donald Trump.
Really, that enlightened me an enormous amount, and I hope that our audience is a little wiser today, having listened to this young man and to this other young man, and having this, I think, this extremely enlightening conversation on one of the topics that's of great interest to not just to America but to the world, the community of women and people who believe in civil rights. This is Indy Badwar standing right in front of the iconic monument, the tomb of Ulysses S. Grant in New York. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.